everyone, and welcome back to Spectrum Talk. I'm here today with Miss Danielle Schutz, an incredible leader in business and finance who is working to dismantle economic inequity through philanthropy and investments. She's an award-winning CEO, CFO, keynote speaker, and strategist, and I've looked forward to speaking to her for such a long time. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me, Danielle.
Thanks for having me. That's quite an intro. Thank you.
Oh,
I'll
you're
take
quite a
it.
person to introduce. I mean, and one of the things I've admired about you so much since I first heard you speak at a business conference years ago, was that you're so relatable. And I love how you share like bits and pieces of your life and success and keep us kind of keyed in to everything that you're doing. So how is everything going?
Everything's good. I think that's such a funny phrase for today. I was talking to my partner this morning about I had some health stuff in 2023, and I'm like, I think I've been through everything that a woman can go through. It's like that song, I Am Every Woman. So when you say relatable, it's like good. Like I hope I can use it for good, right? Because it's certainly been insane. What a ride. Like it's still a ride.
Wow.
We're on a ride, all of us. So it's so interesting to go, yeah, I hope I'm relatable because it certainly is a very real human existence. I'm happy.
And that's big. The fact that you're pushing through and doing so much and still handling like health issues. I hope everything is okay, by the way, but I know that's such a big part of being a woman, just in general, just having to push through and do all the things.
All the things. And it's,
Yeah.
we don't even study women. Like our medical research is so far behind
Yeah.
that, even the most well-intentioned doctors are guessing. So I went through 3 years of them guessing.
Oh my,
And I'm doing really well now. It was something that actually wasn't huge. They actually shouldn't have missed it. But I think so all my friends have it, like everything that's going on. And I'm like, wow, like I feel like a million, I haven't felt this good in years, right? So it's so interesting
wow.
what we live with
Well,
and
that's
how much,
great.
yeah, how much it affects us. So
I'm
yeah,
glad to hear that things are progressing. That's
yeah,
awesome.
thank you.
So, as someone who's always been afraid of math in school, meaning me, I'm always curious as to what makes people get into finance. So, was it something that you just always had an interest in, like in your early education, or was it a job or an internship experience, or did you just always love numbers?
Yeah, no, it's in retrospect, I can put my finger on it, but like coming during the time, I never really thought about it. So now I can look back on fifth grade and say I'm probably a behavioral economist, one, because that's the way my brain naturally works. And so throughout time, I've learned to embrace the way my brain works. And I think we live in a society that doesn't actually let us do that. And I think that's actually why people don't like math, because math is actually incredibly individual. My son is at School of Mines. He's going to be an engineer. It's math. It's a very different math. My partner is an analytical philosopher. It's math. It's very different math than me, who like thinks through graphs and economics and macro conditions and sort of the behavior of humans and the law of averages in order to get to an outcome, to predict outcomes financially. That's the way my brain works. And so the answer is no, because especially as a Black girl, to even use the word economics, no one ever did to me, right? Like I did really good in those classes in college, and like I would tutor my girlfriends at it because it just was natural for me. But we don't really live within structures that sort of allow us to think naturally. So I think we've structured math in this country in a way that has us all believing we don't do math. When actually, I think if we taught it differently and sort of allowed people to function in the way that they do and get to the answers in the way that they want to, naturally, we'd probably all be saying something really differently. And I didn't really know I was good at like budgets and numbers until I was in college and I worked at Open Door Youth Gang Alternatives here in Denver. And they
Okay.
got a federal grant and I needed the hours for work study. So I was like, I'll teach myself how to do it. And it turns out that is like a very hot commodity to have on the job market when I graduated, was to be able to manage federal money that way. And so that sort of launched my career and I just loved it. And it's just my natural way of being in the world. So I think that's been a big propeller for my career, is that I'm doing something that's pretty natural for me.
That's really cool. I think when I was younger, I was good at trigonometry, but then I got a D in statistics in college, and I was like, nope, I'm just gonna write.
Those are totally different maths.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense now when
Right?
you look at
Yeah,
some of
I do
history.
not do trigonometry, but statistics I will nail all day long, right?
That's
Like that,
hilarious.
I don't even have to try at statistics.
Well, tell me about the role that mentorship has played in your life, and how have your mentors helped you face and overcome barriers throughout your career? I know that you said, or you pointed out that as a Black woman, you're not in great company when it comes to a lot of us. So, how were mentorships important in building your career?
Just incredibly important. I was so young, right, when my career started and when I became a CFO. I think one thing for me was that I'm in the money business, and I think that made it a little easier. Like it was easier for me to have mentors because what I do is so tangible to other people, right? Like you can tell, did I make money? Did I lose us money? Did I hit it right? Did I hit a forecast right? Didn't I? So I think I do have that privilege of that I got into the money business where there's a lot less sort of gray in the sense of are you doing well or not. There's also a lot of bias in the money industry, meaning like no one looks like me. No one thinks, oh, you're a CFO. Or to this day, like people will get into a room with me and just don't even think to check the resume of what I've done before they make a million assumptions. So having mentors to remind you who you are and like that the way that you see things is normal. I think having people to tell you, yep, you have the right answer, even when you don't even know how you got there because it's natural for you, is really important. But I've also been mentoring people since I was 25 because I've had employees. And I think that was the most incredible thing for me. To this day, I learn the most when I'm trying to teach somebody else something. Like when you try to show somebody, hey, this is what I would do. And then you look in the mirror and go, oh, you're not even doing that for yourself, Danielle. That has been the journey that I think has been the best about mentorship. I always tell people there's no age at which you should start mentoring somebody else. We all have a lived experience that somebody else is going through in
Mm,
that moment. So there's always something to give. And whenever I give, that's when I learn the most about myself, in good ways and hard ways and all the ways, because it forces you to really look in the mirror. I think having kids so young, that's probably been a part of it for me too, is that
yeah,
I grew this whole career, but my kids and my family were at the center of it. And so I never really lost sight of myself along the way on like, how do I grow as a human?
right. Wow. Well, I guess the reason why I ask about mentorship is because I've heard you speak about it a lot. And then also your app, and I guess mentor service, the Daily Boss app. I'm wondering how you came up with that and how that was. I mean, because it's a groundbreaking technology, right? Like,
Yeah.
especially for business and women in business, to have somebody there to encourage you with like daily messages, aspirations, things like that. So, did that lay the foundation for the Daily Boss app?
It absolutely did. It was like exactly what you're saying. So after I did my TED Talk in 2017, on millennials, like in leadership and in the workplace, I got so much inbound from that, so many emails and people reaching out. And I just saw these themes of questions that women, especially, that's who relate, young women. I was 32 when I did that TED Talk. Um, they were saying like, hey, I need help with this, and what would you do in that situation? And there was no way for me, who is running like still in my career in a major way, to respond to everyone, although like if I could sit on my couch and do that all day I probably would. um and so I said, like, we need to like take these themes, bundle them up. And then I had a friend who was like, yeah, like why don't you start sort of a service to meet people where they're at in their phones and text with these themes. So if it was confidence, imposter syndrome, money, like whatever folks wanted to be learning about, I would just send quotes and podcasts I've read about the topic, or my own, coaching videos that we'd film and just send out to folks who subscribe to the Boss Up, in order to like at least give people a minute in their day to sort of, have something, right? To keep going. Like sometimes that's all that matters, is just a minute, breathe, stop, think about it differently. And then you can totally change your day around, or change your mood around, or change the way you might be beating yourself up about something
Yeah.
around. So that it came from that exact thing. This like, how do we think about technological mentorship? All the data says that like Gen Xers and millennials and Zers are not getting coaching at
Hmm.
all. It's not good.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, a lot of people don't have that voice at all. And for a lot of us, you're the first one in your family, maybe in business, or the
Yep.
first one in your friend group. So that's awesome that you came up with that as like that little nudge that keeps you on track.
I've been the last 2 years since I started the fund. I'm about to come out with a ton more, probably just on social media, not through the Vasa, but around economics and investments and the systems and what's actually going on. Because I realize how much people need to hear that in a way that's digestible too, right? Where these systems are the problem. And I think so many folks are like, well, it's just me. I don't understand it. You said it. Like, well, I just don't do math. I can't afford to invest, or that's fine. But like, I want my people to understand what is happening, how the sausage is getting made behind the scenes, and what's happening to our economy in the country because of the way we've left women and people of color out of the conversation.
Well, I definitely want to get to your investment company and learn all about Demi Fund. But first, I want to know, what advice would you have for people who want to get started in business, but they have no idea where to begin?
Yeah, I think starting your own business is the hardest thing in the whole world. So I think that's the first thing I would say to anyone who's wanting to do that. So I was in corporate America for years before I started my own business, and it was still brutal. It's still brutal now. It's a very different way. And so I think I had to learn a couple things, like what motivates you, because sometimes it's having employees, sometimes it's the safety and structure of an environment. So you have to be really aware of what motivates you, because that's the hardest thing, is that you're going to have to figure out how to motivate yourself every day. I think people get so sick of these systems because all the stuff that happens when you work for somebody else inside the system, that doesn't mean that you have to be an entrepreneur. So it's really like sitting with yourself about that. And then what are you really good at? Like that is the thing I tell people, like, what are you really good at? Because not everyone is a great CEO or CFO or whatever. So knowing that when you go into it, so you can stay focused on that, and then bartering for help. Like Black women start more businesses than any demographic in the country right now, every single day. And we're starting it with nothing. So we have to think about like a barter system. Like Danielle's a great CFO. I can do the money for our businesses. Who's good at marketing and branding? Can you take that on for our businesses? Like that's really what I want to see people start doing, because it's such a lie that you're going to be good at everything, and most of us have jobs while we start our businesses on top of it, and so it's just a hamster wheel. And so it's like, okay, before you start, who are you going to barter with? What does your network look like? Who's missing? And how are you going to spend as many of the hours that you're going to focus on this business doing the thing you're actually good at inside this business? Because if you spend 9 hours working and then another 5 doing a bunch of stuff you're not good at, it's not going to work. Like that, on top of that, you work in a system that doesn't invest in businesses that we start. So
Right.
that's exactly, like those are just things you have to fight for. And then when you can barter, like the chances of you actually getting capital down the line are much higher. Like once you've learned how to barter for what you actually need. So I say
Yeah,
practice that with your crew or who you know, or go out and network with purpose, so that you're actually filling the hole um in the sort of pie that you need in order to start a business.
that's great advice. So I've heard the term venture capital fund many times,
Yeah.
but your newest venture, the Demi Fund, uses value capital fund. And I love that. But why is there an emphasis on value capital?
Yeah, okay. I'm so glad you're asking this. You've done your research. Because I say that, and not one journalist has ever asked me that question. And I say it
Wow.
very purposeful, that I'm hopeful that we can have this conversation.
Yeah.
So I say I have a venture fund. It's structured as a venture fund, but I'm not a venture capitalist, because sort of fundamentally, I don't believe in it as an investment class. It's a bit of a pyramid scheme. It's really hard to win in venture capital. In fact, people who have funds like mine are betting that 1 out of 10 or 20 investments that they make is actually going to work.
Wow.
And folks that go in and do venture often end up worse off than when they started, because it's very market driven. It's not business driven. So they'll have you believe this is all about your idea. Of course, you have to have a business model that's going to work. Like that's the first thing. That's for any type of investment.
Mhm.
But they'll emphasize it in venture in a way that you already know something's off, which is that actually it's all about being able to raise money, right? So you raise rounds at a time. I raise a pre-seed round, which maybe means right when I'm first starting, or I first start to get revenue in the door. and that might be 250,000 or 500,000. Well, that gets you a year if you're good with money.
Mhm.
And then you got to go raise another round, and that's hopefully 1 million or 2 million. And then you got to go raise another round. And that's how fund managers make their money, is that next round, your company is going to be worth more than it is today. And I get money. And it's all paper money. It's like a paper exercise. It's not cash, it's not liquid. So we move money around on paper. And I do
Right.
great as a fund manager, but it doesn't necessarily mean the cash that a company needs to grow that they actually have. So I'm taking equity, part ownership of your business, little chunks at a time, in hopes that every time I take a bigger chunk, you're worth more money. And then
Mm.
I get my return that way, right? And so I know that that's just not my favorite way to invest. And when it comes to who I invest in, Black and brown founders and women, their ability to go raise that next round is next to impossible. And I'm saying that from a data perspective. It's like 1.5% combined.
Wow.
They
Yeah.
get a venture capital. So the bias is so strong, there's no science. And when there's no science and people are using their guts to make bets, and oh, my friend started a business and I'm going to go invest in that business, and more money will flow into a failed entrepreneur like the guy who started WeWork
Mhm.
than somebody who's starting out for the first time. So if you think about the way bias flows in the financial system towards us, we are riskier. That's what their gut tells them. It's their gut. That's how
Yeah.
hard this is to overcome. And they're using their gut to make these decisions on an unproven business model. It's like, well, like it's literally the tail is chasing the head, right? And
Yeah.
so it's just this spiral. So I just do this game much differently. It's structured like a venture fund so that I can still invest in early stage companies that may not have years of proven model. So I want to stay in the early stage, but we really want to be a partner and grow and scale a business and build value into the company. Like I'm not going to say you're worth more just because I need it to be worth more. We're going to put points on the actual board. And I think investing in founders of color, there's a natural cadence to that. And it's proving itself out for me. Now it's hard because I'm doing it very differently. It's like inventing an asset class, and people who like it the other way are very uncomfortable. I have investors into the fund, right? So I'm having to keep my investors happy while trying to stay on this course of like, no, we need to do this different. It's also hard because the need is so great
Mhm.
among founders of color. Like that is hard for me. That's been the hardest thing, where it's a very specific type of business that you end up investing in. I don't do any brick and mortar businesses, or it's very high growth, high margin opportunity, because otherwise it wouldn't even actually be fair for me to take chunks of your investment out. That I
Right.
could never build wealth for the business owner that way, and that's important to me. But it's a lot more no's than it is yeses, and I hate that because I know how great the need is. I know how brilliant my community is. I know how resilient they are, how they can make a dollar stretch. And so I wish that I had a fund where you just invested in every kind of thing
Yeah.
and blended. But this is a start. I'm starting. So give me 5 more years and then we'll do that.
Oh, of course. Yeah. So, what is the process then when somebody applies for the DEMI fund? What are you looking for? And what do these businesses or ventures, or yeah, ventures entail? And what like sticks out to you the most as something that you're like, I want to build value in this?
Yeah, so specifically, it's something where there's going to be a significant amount of volume that you have access to from a customer perspective. So I know people will often say, oh, like tech enabled or high growth or any of that. It's like, yeah, that's not specific enough. So I try to be specific with people. There's a lot of customers in your future, potentially. We can go
Mhm.
take a chunk of the market out. It's not isolated to one city. It's not isolated. We really think there's a whole volume play there. That's for me. I think way too many people bet on rate, which means bet on pricing of
Yeah.
something. I just want to know how. There's a ton of people that want to or need what you're selling, right? So that could be tech enabled, that could be a product. Like we don't do a lot of products, but I do like food as medicine. So because I think that's the future, right? Like
Right.
I think we're gonna have to stop poisoning our people in this country with our food that we give them. Like I think
Hopefully.
fundamentally the healthcare system can't support it. So I'm looking ahead to go, okay, like who's starting businesses in that space? And that's going to be such a huge chunk of the population who it has a lived experience that 70% of the population could relate to, right? So it's a lot of what I know. And so we invest in founders of color, but they're solving problems for people of color, right? Like that, and they're the only ones that would know how to. Like I have a investment into what we call the eHarmony of housing, which they basically figured out how to reduce eviction rates by 90% for folks with Section 8 and vouchers.
Okay.
Housing is a crisis in this country. So there's the volume, right? Figuring out how to get and keep people housed is a problem we have. We've had it for a long time. So now it's reached crisis, and we'll have it for a very, very long time, and it will evolve. So the future of that company being able to grow is huge. Like that's the first thing. They're solving a problem I know other investors are going to overlook. Venture capitalists aren't even going to be able to tell you what Section 8 is. It is
Mm,
a bubble of people. The majority of them are not just white men, they're white men that went to Stanford or Harvard.
right.
Majority. Like you have to think about how small that bubble is from a lived experience. So like in many ways, it's not even their fault. It's like you don't know what you don't know. But they're
Yeah.
gonna go, I don't even know what problem that person's solving. That business wouldn't even get in the door for somebody else. For me, I'm like, wait, what are you doing? The other
Wow.
thing is that we drive towards revenue and profit, which is not necessarily what happens in venture capital. So that'll be the third thing that we're really looking for, is that what is the pathway to actually bringing money into this business and then keeping it, making money. And we really support and are partners with our founders in that. What big contracts do you have out there? How do we actually help you? We're business people, all of us, like old school P&L, grow and scale companies. We're going to be in your business. We're going to be on your boards, but it's because we actually want to grow and scale your company. If you couldn't raise another dollar, how do we get you to profit?
Yeah.
That's the way we think and sort of push. So we're looking for partners. I'll spend time vetting a company for a year sometimes before we make an actual investment. I'll help companies put things in place that they need in order for them to be investable. So I'm always saying, like, how do I engineer the win? And the investment's sort of the last piece of it. Then we put money in, we're off to the races. But how do we get you ready for that? So it's, venture or any type of equity investment is rocket fuel. That's what I tell people. Like, if you want to run your company for the rest of your life and pass it down to your children, this isn't the right investment. Too many people in your business, taking
Yeah.
ownership of your business. Many people are predatory in this private equity space where they will take it. And so I'll say that up front, like, is that your dream, or do you want to create a $500 million company with me and sell it or take it public? Because that's a different dream, right? And so making sure that we understand where people want to be in 10 years from now, when this life cycle is supposed to go one way or the other. So those are the things we're looking for. And I'm telling you, I use my gut too. It's why I'm a good investor. There's a lot of gut, but it's because I'm sitting with people where I'm like, oh yeah, I was a teen mom. And that was back way before housing was the crisis it is now. I
Yeah.
have a 21-year-old son who's not going to be able to afford to buy a home even after getting an engineering degree. I have a 16-year-old daughter, right? I sit on the board of Denver Health, right? I understand what safety net hospitals are facing. And then who's solving for that
Mm,
across the board is what we're looking for. So we have sort of healthcare companies, and which can include food as medicine, um, data, sort of tech enabled, and data enable and analytics. So people who are collecting and using data. So I actually put that housing company in there for the most part, because what they're using is data in order to keep people housed, and keep landlords happy, and matching a landlord to a tenant in a good fit. And then we have like a lot of sort of I have a media company that sits inside my data, but also just infrastructure, like people who are innovating on supply chain, people who are innovating on, middle income housing, those types of things. That's, we're looking for that too, and sort of innovating on climate and how do we do things more green, versus just paper straws, right? Like that, those
yeah.
are the things we're looking for. That, like, I could almost sell my portfolio to the government as far as this is how you fix stuff.
Wow.
That's the way we think about it.
I'm sitting here listening to you talk, and one of my favorite shows is the Shark Tank. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she would change the whole game of the Shark Tank.
I watch it and then I
Like,
stop. Like I watched it for many seasons because I do. It's like sort of hard to watch it unfold in the
yeah,
way that
because
it
you
does.
see all the predatory stuff that
Yep,
you're working
exactly.
against.
Yeah, and they're
Well,
just taking a bit. I call it the craps of investing. They're just
yeah.
taking, they're just rolling the dice and hoping that there's one hitter. And I prefer to say, like, how do we get 8 of my companies to be at least $100 million versus
Wow.
$1 billion one, right?
Yeah.
That's an even better return profile.
Yeah. Well, there's been recent controversy. I know you know because you have mentioned it publicly, and I love that you're speaking about it because it affects you directly, and everything that you do. So it's surrounding those financial resources and support that are dedicated to historically underrepresented groups. So, from your perspective, why is it so important to create those equitable opportunities for people impacted by discrimination and that lack of access to capital?
Yeah, I don't think it's just necessary or like important. I think it's necessary. Like I being inside this machine, starting my own fund, being inside private equity, it's 10 times worse than I even thought it was.
Mm,
The way that the systems are designed for complete and utter failure of anyone who's not already in the machine with wealth
yeah.
is it's painful. Like it's hard for me to even keep doing it some days, right? And like it's because I want people to know like, oh no, I know how broken this thing is, right? And if they only see it from a distance, like, oh, you're just like doing private equity as a part of the machine. I'm like, no, no, no. I had to get into the machine to understand this whole machine kind of needs to get blown up and start over. Because here's the issue. We are concentrating wealth in a way that is completely unsustainable for us as a country.
Mm,
Period. 70% of the country are women and people of color. White women have 56 cents on the dollar of wealth. Black women have 5 cents
oh my
on the
gosh.
dollar for white men's wealth.
Mm,
But here's the problem. Your younger generations that are entering the workforce and in the workforce are Black and brown and women.
mm,
And single women, nearly 50% of women are staying single, which makes their wealth profile much less,
wow.
right? 86% of Black women are the breadwinner of their household, married or not. They make the
Wow.
most money. They're the one that makes the money in the home. We're putting money into a machine as boomers are retiring. Boomers made $1. There was a lot more white men in
Mm,
the boomer generation than there. It just is. That's just the data. So if I'm retiring and taking out $1, Social Security, taking out $1, because that's how much I made. It's all based on your income, right? Medicare, taking out $1. Investments, taking my investments out to be less risky. But you have a whole work of grouping. The working class now is cents on that dollar. That's what we're putting into the machine. Like
mm,
your math doesn't work. We're in a really bad spot. Like the debt in this country isn't just because we spend too much. It's because we have a revenue problem. And that revenue problem is based in racism and sexism. And like we've got to have that conversation. You can't have paid people for hundreds of years 0 to cents on the dollar, and they're the ones putting taxes into the machine, and then have the people retire who worked hard. I'm not even saying they didn't, but they get to take $1.
mm,
It's completely broken. You can't pay for it. Like if we all just said, hey, we're not going to pay our taxes until tax season, we're not going to pay it out of our paycheck every month, like our country like wouldn't run.
yeah, exactly.
Like it wouldn't be able to run. And so this is a reminder of like this is just should be for the people. Like this is the people's money. And so it's I don't even want to talk about it anymore. I don't want to get people to like get credit and act like they're doing something charitable. Like
Mm,
you're actually an idiot if you don't invest your money this way. Like that's how I really feel. Like it's not smart. We have to fix this problem. My mom is retiring. I am very concerned about that.
yeah.
I'm very concerned about the fragility of this market. And my mom, who worked hard her entire life for us, is retiring now in
Mm,
this market. And so it's just like this deep passion. And it's there's no answer. There's no system that is the answer. It's a combo of things. And some days I feel like, well, it's just gonna have to crumble and we'll all be fine because we didn't own anything in the first place, right? And have to get rebuilt, or there's gonna be a few people with enough power, enough money, and enough smarts to go, whoa, this is the only solution. Like we're out of money and a little out of time. Like our debt is $31 trillion as a country. Unimaginable. People wouldn't have been able to imagine that even 25 years ago.
well, and the out of time thing is important because I think we look at history like it was so long ago, And we think that we just have all this time to fix whatever problems exist, and time doesn't slow down.
It doesn't slow down. And there has to be a generation eventually where this sort of the chickens come home to roost, and this the economic policy of race and gender and the way this country was built is going to start folding in on itself. And we've reached that where the volume of people is greater than it can be for us to continue this cycle with such disparities, right? There's too many people who the system has to pay for versus them paying into the system. And we want to, we're like, please,
Yeah.
invest in our business. I'd be happy to pay business taxes. I would feel so great every year. That's the crazy part. It's like, we want to. Black women are the most educated demographic in the country. We want to do it. So like the fact that there's these barriers is just starting to feel like people are eating their logic alive. So they're not doing the math in the way that they need to. And so I think it's coming to a head. I think it's us. I think we're the generation where we're going to see it have to change. I just don't know how much more painful it's going to have to be before it happens, I guess is what I would say. I don't know. I just know it's
Right.
happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I want to know more about your journey with self-care, because with all
Mhm.
that said, you're a mom, you're an entrepreneur, you're this business figure. I mean, I'm sure you're being pulled literally and figuratively in a bunch of directions all the time. So, how do you take care of yourself and recharge and stay strong?
Yeah, I mean, this has been it's evolving, right? As I get older, I think sort of fundamentally in the beginning, my career came after I was a mom. I had Kai at 16 and Layla at 21. I got married in 19. And so I sort of had this very centering force in my life, and I loved it, right? I don't recommend it. I got a 16 and 21-year-old now. So, so I tell you guys just enjoy your youth. But
Yeah.
for me, um, it felt very centering. So it felt like even though I built a big career and there's been so much stress, like I think having them to come home to centered me so much. Like having my kids gave me such focus and
Mm.
clarity on what matters. And I know where I come from. And they're a reminder of that every day. And then they grew up. And so then there's been like this last 4.5 years where I was grieving in many ways. So I got divorced in 2018 after 13 years of marriage, and like my son graduated in 2020. So it's just been this like grieving process of like, well, like who are you without that
Yeah.
centering force in the middle? And so then I didn't really have great self-care routines. And I realized how much people pleasing had played a role in my life, how much that was my trauma response to everything I'd been through. And that it just gets reinforced, right? When you're a people pleaser and you just turn into this really successful thing on paper, people actually just reinforce what's actually trauma for you and you don't
Yeah.
even realize it. So you don't want to let go of it. And I had to figure out like, how do I motivate myself? What do I do if nobody understands what I'm saying, what I just walked you through? I've been saying for years,
Yeah.
and to watch it have to happen anyway. And I think for me, it's now about energy and like how I spend my time. I'm not in 12 hours of meetings a day like I used to be. I'm
Yeah.
not. I don't I don't make myself available in the same way. And that was really, really hard because what I never wanted was my community to go like, oh, she forgot where she came from and like
Hmm.
she's so hard to get a hold of and like all of that. And then I'm like, you have a lot of company. A lot of companies. People don't even know how these things are structured, but it takes 5 separate companies to have one fund. And I
Wow.
already own other companies. And
Yeah.
so you're like, if that was a male, number one, and especially if it was a white male, no one would ever say any of those things. And
Right.
so at some point, you're trying to live up to some version of a reality that's not possible. And so learning to sort of let go and like be like, people will say what they are, make the circle smaller, be around people who fill you up, not who drain you. It has been a really brutal lesson, but it is definitely what it is now, where it's like I just have to integrate it into the way I think about my time, my day, sitting and like having lunch. Like I just went to lunch, came back to the computer, sort of letting myself enjoy some of the successes of what I've been through. Like I've never been that way. I've always just turned around and ran up the next hill. As soon as we got to one mountaintop, I was already looking to see what was the next one to climb, like just
Yeah.
chasing ghosts a little bit. Does that make sense? And so now I'm like, you're your own boss. Like, why are you still like working in this structure that is killing you? You don't have to work 8 hours a day like that, or you can come back at night, or like, what does your day need to look like? I had to, I wasn't feeling good so much last year that I had to rest, had to reconcile. There was like so many dark moments. We went through like a really traumatic second marriage, like quick, quickly married, quickly divorced. Like it was just time to like face the demons. And so there was like no, sometimes you just have no choice. And self-care is not, it's not bubble baths. I wish it was. I mean, those are great because I have taken baths every night of my life since I was a little kid. Both my kids do too.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so I think there were things that I naturally did to regulate. But it is actually for me that you have to face yourself down, and there has to be some liberation
Mm.
of the way you hold things to be true that just really aren't true, and you have self-worth in a way that I have never had, and people that surprises people, and it's just true. We all navigate it. So I think that's what I'm doing for myself, is going like, yeah, like I'll give you an example. Like, why is Mother's Day about the kids?
It totally is.
You know what I mean? It's like I like for years felt like so judged if I didn't like want to go to this huge family event with everyone in my family for Mother's
Yeah.
Day versus like going to the mountains. Like I remember one time my dad was like, "Don't forget, being a mother is your number one job," and I'm like,
Oh my gosh.
on Mother's Day I was like on a trip, and I'm like, this should be like the one day where no one guilts
Yeah.
me if I do not.
I
But you
always
see,
see all the moms with their families at the zoo and stuff, and the moms look so stressed, and the kids are having a blast. It's like,
exactly
this is work.
right. It's like it's not breakfast in bed. It's like literally, can we get one day that we just do what we want to do? Like
Yeah.
it's so backwards. And so it's just little things like that where you're like, I'm not just gonna like fall in line and do what I think I'm supposed to do. What do I want?
Mhm.
What do I want out of this life? Like, how do I want to feel when I wake up in the morning? And so that's the journey I'm on. And it's very difficult. Like, I'm a lifelong, I will be recovering from people pleasing the way an addict will always have that in them and have to recover and have to make sure that they watch it, with intention. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's so important that you've learned that, at this point in life, because a lot of people, they let their whole lives go by. And then when they've lived their lives, they're like, oh, I should slow down a little bit and I don't have to push myself this hard. And it's like, look at how much life you've rushed through, and it does take a toll on us. But I think that you made some excellent points. And I don't want to trigger any like achievement things. Is actually one of the
Oh, no,
things.
you won't. It's,
Well, one of the things I was going to ask is like, as somebody who's like this very high achieving person that has these great ideas and is always doing stuff, do you feel like you always have to be doing stuff? And then I was like, well, no, I'm not going to ask that. But then one of my questions is, what do you have, what are you looking forward to in the future? What projects are you working on? So it's that same kind of thing. It's like, no, congratulations for what you're doing now. If you do things
yeah,
in the future, great. But if you don't, you've done enough. Like you've
yeah.
contributed to a lot of great things in society. So
I'm not even, I haven't even gotten started. So the question's fine. It's
yeah.
but it is also like maybe it's not a project. Like maybe it's this question where if I could just tell every Black woman, like, you'd please liberate yourself as best you can. Like, God, we hold the world up, and I like achieving things. I had to separate it, right, and sort of embrace the good, and I'm learning to expel the bad ways in which I operate in that, right? It's just one side of the coin or the other, right? It's the same thing though. I am who I am. And so it's starting to go like, you are who you are, like in DNA and in the way you were raised. Like that has created this person. Are you proud of that?
Yeah.
Or is there stuff you have to shed on why you're doing a bunch of activities? Yes. And then when I shed those, I still want I cannot sit here and not do what I need to do for the world. Like I've been given gifts access. I sit at tables. Like I will never take that for granted enough to ever stop. Does that make sense? Like I'm not gonna
Yeah,
stop. Like that's not, I'm just saying I'm motivated for a different reason. And I really like the person who's doing the things
that's great.
versus I'm doing it because I want everyone else to like the person who's doing the things.
That's so key. Oh my gosh. We're gonna end on that note because I don't have more questions anyway, but that is so quotable. I love that. I can't
Yeah,
wait to see
I
what
just
the next
pray
episode
rest for all
brings.
of us. And I don't mean like rest, but I mean rest
Yeah,
in the fact that I hope that what I wish for all my girlfriends every day when I wake up is that because I know how hard it is. Just like I feel like we've hit a wall. It's in the environment right now, right? Like I don't know how old you are, but I'm 38 and I'm like,
close. Very
yeah,
close.
like this 30, 40-year-old, 50-year-old Black women, like I just feel
Yeah.
like something's in the air. And I feel like it's because we're about to have to for real save the world, like all the stuff I'm talking about. And so I just wish rest, meaning like I hope that you feel chosen and I
Mm,
hope that you choose yourself. And I hope that you say no to things that don't make you feel good and yes to things that do. And I hope that you have brunch and mimosas or, you know, mimosas without alcohol in them if that's your thing and that you just don't feel bad for
yeah.
who you are. Like that's what I pray for my friends, for myself, for all of us, because I think we're getting ready for, I don't know, maybe we've been being prepared all these generations of handing this down, this strength down. There's a reason. So I just hope that it's for something good. We don't need to stop, but also just learning how to rest in the meantime.
Well, I'll tell you what, when that day comes, I want you in the head of the pack. Like, have any political aspirations?
For the first time in my life, I have started to think about it, but it's only because I think it's a system that's going to need to get rebuilt. I don't
Yeah.
want to go into this system and try to do
Right.
anything because it's again, it's like that's not, there's no rest in that. I'll be so frustrated banging my head up against a wall. But because for the first time, I think that they're going to need us to sort of, who knows how to actually rebuild it in an equitable
Right.
way. I would do it. I would step into that gap. So if that's what's necessary one of these days, maybe one of these days soon, for goodness sake, with everything that's going on, right? It's like
Yeah.
I can only imagine who's gonna have
Yeah.
to step in that gap. But yeah, yeah, maybe I will. Finally, I used to say never, but
Well, I can't wait to see what you have in store for your life and just your businesses and everything. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today and for, sharing all the wisdom that you've been sharing. Thank you so
awesome.
much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm so glad it worked out, and this is important work that you do.
Of course. Well, thank you. And thank you to everyone for tuning into this episode of Spectrum Talk. To learn more about the Demi Fund, visit demifund.com. And if you have any questions for Danielle, follow her on social media or leave a comment below. See you next time. Bye.